Hi, my name is Rajesh, and in this video, I'm going to show you how you can migrate your data from PostgreSQL to MongoDB Atlas using a streaming platform like Kafka. In today's data-driven world, it's always a challenge for organizations to have their data in a secure, resilient, and scalable database. So, if an organization wants to move their data from one database engine to a more better database engine, it's always a challenge since all the database technologies work in a different architecture and different model. To move your data from one database technology to another is always a tedious process. In today's video, I'll be showing you one such example where we would be moving the data from PostgreSQL to MongoDB Atlas, and to make that transfer of data, we will be using the power of Kafka. So let's first try to understand what exactly is Kafka and what are its various components. Kafka is an event streaming platform which helps you to deliver and receive messages across your multiple systems. Consider Kafka as the postal delivery system, just like the postal service would receive your letters and then post them to their destinations as the address mentioned on your letters. In the similar fashion, Kafka would receive messages from different sources known as producers and then would send them to its respective destinations known as consumers in the Kafka world. And these messages, which are transferred from the producers to the consumers, are stored in Kafka in flat files known as topics. To facilitate the transfer of this data from the producers to the consumers, Kafka utilizes processes known as connectors. The connectors which transfer the data from the producers to Kafka topics are known as source connectors, and the connectors which would get the data from the topic and send them to the consumers are known as sink connectors. So these are the basic terminologies in Kafka. In our example, we would be transferring the data from PostgreSQL to Kafka and then to MongoDB Atlas using source and sink connectors. And for this purpose, we would be using the cloud version of Kafka known as Confluent Kafka. Now let's see with a demo how we could actually implement this. To use the cloud version of Kafka, you would require an account on Confluent website. So if I log into confluent.io and sign up for the cloud version, it would send a verification email to your email account. So once you verify your email, you would be asked to create a password for your account. And now your account is created, and now you can use your account to log in to Confluent Kafka. So it will just ask you some basic questions like what's your purpose of using this Confluent Kafka. So while logging in, it will also help you create your cluster, and for the clusters, there is no usage charges. As you can see, you can select which cloud service you want to use for your cluster. I'll choose AWS, and also you can choose the availability zone where you want your cluster to be created. And for me, the nearby is Frankfurt, so I'll choose that. So here it will require your card details if you are planning to use Confluent Kafka, the paid version, or you're going to use it for the long term, then you can already provide it, and then your bill would be auto. Then you can already provide it, and then you would have auto remittance of your bill. But for now, for this demo, I'll skip it. So my cluster has been already created, and it's already suggesting me different things which I can do with the cluster. So this is the landing page of the cluster, and here you can see some options, and one of them is topics, where you can see if you have an existing topic. So right now, since it's an empty cluster, you don't have any topic, and we need to create topics if required. We'll get to that. You can also see some other options like connectors. So we discussed about sink and source connectors, and for the Confluent Cloud, you have some default plugins which you can use to create your connectors. So let's start and first create our source connector. And since we are transferring data from Postgres to Kafka, so we'll need a source connector for Postgres. So I'll select Postgres source connector, and here we can define the name of the topic into which I want to write the data from PostgreSQL. So the topic name can be meaningful as per what the data would reside in that particular topic. And you can also leave it blank if you want the topic name to be the same as the table. So I will leave it blank and press continue. And this is regarding the access. If you want your connectors to have a granular or a global access, so since it's a demo, I'll keep it as a global access. And we can generate API keys to access those connectors. You can copy these and save it in your local, as these might be required in future and these are not available to see again. And these are only visible now and won't be visible once you have passed this particular stage. So you can just make a copy of the key and your secret. And on this page, you'll be providing the details of the PostgreSQL database from which you're trying to get the data into Kafka. It can be on-premise or cloud. You just need the connection params for your PostgreSQL database. So I'm using a cloud version of PostgreSQL from where I'm going to get the data into Kafka and then transfer the data into MongoDB. So I'll just provide the connection parameters. So I've provided the details, including the user password and the database name to which I'm going to connect. And now I click on continue. So here it would ask for the details of the table from which I want to get the data into my Kafka topic. So for this example, I have a table user. So let me show that table. So this is the table which I'm trying to transfer into Kafka and then into MongoDB for this example. So this has username, email, age, gender, and city for different users. And I have 10 entries in this. So I have provided the table name here. And this is just the time zone of the database to UTC. And this is the output record value into which the data has to be transmitted in messages from the table of PostgreSQL to Kafka. So I'll choose it to be JSON. And in the advanced configuration, I can provide the mode of transfer of data. So I'll choose incrementing. You can also choose timestamp. So this is basically how you want to transfer the data and what would be its key. So if you choose timestamping, then it would be the timestamp field which you will select and on the basis of which the data would be transferred. So I have chosen incrementing, so I can provide a column name here, which would be the key. So if I open the table which I'm trying to transfer, and you can see the primary key is user ID. So I'll choose the incrementing column name as user ID. And there are some other additional configurations which you can change, like how many intervals should the polling be happen or how many rows should be fetched per batch. So this is the default value and you can change if you want. And now I'll click on continue. So there are also options to add message transforms, like if you want to do some transformations on the data. So here you can provide the number of tasks for the connector which you want. So if you want parallel processing of data for the PostgreSQL connector, then you can provide multiple tasks. So I'll keep it to 1, and you can also see the pricing for that one task which you'll create. And now you can see this is the JSON file for all the configurations which we have just provided, including the login credentials for our PostgreSQL database and also other details like the configurations which we have provided. So I'll just go to continue and you see the connector is created, and right now it's in provisioning stage. That means that the connector is getting started, and once it gets started, you will start seeing the data being moved from PostgreSQL, or actually being copied from PostgreSQL to your Confluent Kafka topic. So it will take some time. Let's wait for that. And now you see that the Postgres connector is running. And if I go to topics, you can see a new topic has been created, and the topic name is same as the table name which we had provided for the PostgreSQL database. And if I select the topic and go to messages, you can see there is some transfer of data already, and there are 10 messages received. So these are the 10 rows of data which you had in your user database. So these are 10 rows of data which you had in your user table in your accounts database. So you can also see the value. So you can see these are the messages, and this is the structure of that message in a JSON format. So we have received all the messages out here. And if I add a new entry to my table, so I'll add an 11th row to my table. So when I run this, you can see that this table has the new entry. Now if I go back to the topic and if I see the messages, you can see the new value has already reached here. That is David Shaw, that new user which I had added. So it's like all the data gets streamed immediately, instantly into the topic. So now we have all the data from our PostgreSQL in our topic. And now for the migration step, we'll need a sync connector, which will actually sync the data from this topic to my MongoDB Atlas database. So let's create that. I'll go to connectors, and in connectors, I'll search for MongoDB. So there are two connector plugins specific for MongoDB Atlas. One is MongoDB Atlas source, and the other one is the sync connector. So for our example, we are actually transferring the data from the topic into the MongoDB cluster. So we'll be creating the sync connector. So I'll select that, and now I have to provide the name of the topic from where I want to transfer the data into my MongoDB collection, and the topic name is user. So I'll select that, and here I can generate the API key and download to access this particular connector in future through the API credentials. So I'll keep a copy of these, and here I have to provide the connection parameters for the MongoDB Atlas where I'm going to transfer the data from the topic. So I have provided the details including the user credentials, and this is the database into which I'm going to push the data from the Kafka topic, and the collection into which the data would be stored is Mongo_user. So when you create either the sync or the source connector, you have to make sure that the database from which you are trying to get the data into the topic, or get the data from the database or write into the database, you have to make sure that the IPs of Confluent is whitelisted for your database. So you need to have these added in the firewall of your database. So you can get these IPs from here. Now I'll click on continue, and here I can provide the record format. So I'll keep it as JSON, just like I had used for the source connector. And in advanced setting, I can do some other changes, like if I want to change the retry or to increase the poll intervals, I can do that. So for now, I'll not do anything. And this is the ID strategy, like what should be the underscore ID of your document be based on. So I have kept everything as default, and now I'll click on continue. So now it's validating the configurations to check if there are any errors, and now it's asking for the tasks just like for the source connector. So I'll keep it at default 1, and when I click on continue, you can see all your configurations in this JSON format, and you can also see the pricing of your sync connector. And now I'll go to the last step. And now my sync connector has started. If I select that, I can see the details. You can see the messages are not yet processed, but you can see the settings and check all the configurations out here. And now if I connect to my MongoDB Atlas database, I'm using MongoDB Compass to connect, and you can see the collection has been created. And if I select that, you can see that there are 11 documents in my Mongo_user collection, and all the documents from the PostgreSQL is now transferred in real time, and it's an active connection. So as and when there is a new entry or there is an update or any CRUD operation on your PostgreSQL, it has been transferred to the topic as a message, and in real time it gets transferred to this particular collection. So in this way, you can migrate all your tables in PostgreSQL to MongoDB collections, and you would have all that data transmitted through cloud in a secured manner. So you can see these are the two connectors which we had created. One is the Postgres source connector, which transmitted the data from PostgreSQL to the Kafka topic and MongoDB Atlas sync connector, which had streamed the data from that particular topic into my MongoDB Atlas cluster. So this is an active connection, so all the real-time data is getting transmitted. So if you do not want this active connection anymore, and once your migration is completed, you can stop your connector. So you can stop it by just stop it by going to settings, and you can see a delete connector here. So you can just delete it, and then there would be no data transmission happening between the PostgreSQL to your Kafka topic. And as there is no data being written to the topic, once all the data is transmitted to your MongoDB Atlas database, you can actually delete the sync connector as well. So I can go to settings and I can delete it. If you do not want to delete the connectors, you can also pause them if you do not want any transmission to happen, but maybe use the connector in a later point of time. You can pause and resume the connector. But once your migration is completed, you can delete the connectors. So I'm also deleting the sync connector out here. And as part of cleanup, I can also delete the topic. So I can go to users, configurations, and you'll see a option to delete the topic. So now all the resources which we created for the migration has been deleted. And this brings us to the end of this particular session where we had discussed how Kafka can be used to. And this brings us to the end of this particular video where we discussed how we can transfer the data from PostgreSQL to MongoDB Atlas cluster using Confluent Kafka. So this brings us to the end of this video where we saw how we can migrate the data from PostgreSQL to MongoDB Atlas cluster using Confluent Kafka. I hope this video was helpful to you. Thank you for watching.